I am Z. Scott, President of Chicago State University. I am delighted to welcome you to the third and final installment of the 2022 Black History Month Presidential Lecture Series. I'd like to take a moment to thank and recognize our sponsors for this year's series, our premier sponsor, Discover Financial, and our associate sponsor, JP Morgan Chase. We are so grateful for their ongoing support of Chicago State and our students. I'd also like to welcome and thank today's speaker, Anthony, also known as Tony Anderson, and our student moderator, Dante Taylor, for joining us. Finally, I'd like to thank each of you for joining us virtually. Our theme for this month's Black History Month has been Lifting as We Climb. Our stories continue. Our theme highlights the accomplishments of our ancestors and our responsibilities to the generations to come. This year's Presidential Leadership Series, Lecture Series, has highlighted the incredible contributions and accomplishment of Chicago State University alumni throughout Chicago and the world. And today you'll hear from an amazing Chicago State University alum who, after securing his degree from CSU, has gone on to become a global leader within the financial services industry, a highly sought after corporate advisor, business strategist, and an engaged and committed community leader. Our lecture this afternoon will be led by a current Chicago State student, Dante Taylor. Dante, also a CSU undergraduate alum, received his undergraduate degree in management from our College of Business. Currently, he is in his final semester of CSU's MBA program, where he is pursuing an MBA with a finance concentration. Dante recently served 2 terms as an outreach ambassador for CSU's AmeriCorps, a service-based program sponsored by Serve Illinois. As a member of CSU's AmeriCorps, Dante and his team developed and hosted numerous educational and economic workshops on CSU's campus, as well as throughout the 1st Congressional District, with the goal of helping over 1,000 youth. Dante credits his CSU mentors and sponsors with supporting him not only academically, but professionally and personally. These individuals include College of Business Dean Derek Collins and College of Business Associate Dean Roosevelt Martin. After graduation from CSU, Dante would like to expand his career in real estate and move into corporate real estate finance or private equity real estate transactions and valuations. Dante will lead our conversation with College of Business Accounting graduate Anthony K. Anderson. Mr. Anderson is a talented and seasoned executive with over 40 years of experience in financial services and consulting. He brings a wealth of experience in building and scaling business and has significant knowledge and experience in the areas such as mergers and acquisitions, corporate governance, financial reporting and SEC matters, as well as diversity and inclusion. Prior to his retirement in 2012, Mr. Anderson had a successful career spanning 35 years with Ernst & Young. Ernst & Young is a global assurance, tax, transaction, and advisory services firm. Most recently, he served as the vice chair and Midwest managing partner of Ernst & Young, where he oversaw a practice of 4,000 audit, tax, and transaction professionals serving clients throughout the Midwest. Mr. Anderson was also a member of E&Y's governing board, the Americas Executive Board. He currently serves as an independent director on the corporate boards of AAR Corp., Avery Dennison, Exxon Corporation, and Marsh McLennan. He is also a member of the executive committee of the United States Golf Association. Mr. Anderson is deeply committed to helping urban public schools and communities be the best they can be. He served several years as chair of the Chicago Urban League and Perspectives Charter Schools. He is an established thought leader and a frequent speaker on issues related to corporate governance and diversity and inclusion. Please join me this afternoon in welcoming our moderator, Dante Taylor, and our distinguished alum, Anthony A. Anderson. Thank you so much.
We'd like to thank you, President Scott, for that generous introduction. How are you doing, Mr. Anderson?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So let's get started. You graduated from CSU in 1979 with a degree in accounting. Tell us, how did you come to attend Chicago State University?
Well, Dante, first thing, I graduated in 1977. I almost hate to make that correction because it just makes me 2 years older in the like. But I graduated in 1977, and I wound up going to Chicago State because, well, I went to high school at Mendel Catholic High School, which is right down the street from Chicago State, and I grew up in Phoenix, Illinois, and my parents couldn't send me to college, so I wound up working at A&P food stores and had to find a place where I could pay for it myself. And so when I looked around, I wound up looking at Chicago State and decided that's where I was going to attend. And so I actually worked in the evenings and went to school during the day.
Well, I'd like to welcome you, a fellow South Suburban resident such as myself. And next, I would like to know, what was the reason that you chose accounting as an area of concentration?
It isn't because I had any knowledge that was all that significant. I wound up taking an accounting class in high school. And I was always pretty good at math. I was always pretty good in writing and the like. And so I came into Chicago State with that little bit of background. And the teacher I had in college said I was pretty good at it. And so when I went to Chicago State, and you're looking around to figure out what you want to do, I decided to take an accounting class at Chicago State. And then when I did that, it went really well. And I started spending more time in the business school and the accounting program, and eventually decided that I was going to make that my major.
So after the completion of your undergrad degree at Chicago State University, did you enter into the field of accounting after graduation?
I did. So when I graduated, I went to work for, at the time, it was Ernst & Ernst. And with a number of mergers, it became Ernst & Young. But I had offers from, back then it was the Big Eight. I had a number of offers and decided to go to work for Ernst & Young. And I did that without really knowing what the future was going to hold. But and so I started right out of school, never went back for my MBA, although I always had aspirations for doing it. But I was doing so much at the firm, I just never found a block of time where it was practical for me to go back and get my MBA. So I never went back and got it, and wound up being with the firm for 35 years.
Okay. So what would you say led you to pursue a career in business?
I like business. At the end of the day, I love capitalism. I love the energy around it. So I always just had an innate interest in business. I worked for A&P food stores, and they wanted me to stay on and the like. I didn't have any interest in doing that. I always felt like the last thing I want to do is continue to work at A&P, and I had high aspirations to do some major things. And so I enjoyed business. I just enjoyed that area. And by the way, Dante, I had some pretty darn good mentors and advisors along the way that I met, including, folks at Chicago State, as well as folks outside the school. And when I joined the firm, some folks that were, at the firm. And so all of them continued to push me along to do more and more in the business world.
So leading up into the next question, what advice would you give current Chicago State University's student scholars such as myself that's interested in pursuing a career in business?
Well, I mean, I think, I always think first things first, right? You know, finish school and finish strong, so one of the things that you learn about a person immediately is, how did they perform academically? That kind of gives you a sense for at least one data point around whether a person will be particularly good in business. So first take care of that element and really perform well. And then I would say use the resources of the school. So when I went to work for EY, Ernst at the time, we had at Chicago State, we had one great career advisory office. And, we had a whole host of companies that would come in looking for outstanding students. I got my opportunity to go to Ernst & Young through that placement office. And so it turned out to be extraordinarily valuable to me. Back then, all 8 firms visited the school. And so I got interviews with all of them. In addition to that, 2 years before, I wound up getting internships at different places as well. And so I'd say use those resources. And it certainly served me well, and it was really well done. So I would say use them.
And I can speak to that briefly with my journey through the university. And when I speak to a lot of students that are coming into the university, I like to let them know, utilize all the resources that the university offer, because all of them are great resources and they can benefit you not only academically, but professionally and personally as well. So I appreciate you bringing up the fact about the Career Center. Today we call it the Career Development Center, led by Miss LaKale Palmer Pratt. And she does a phenomenal job of just helping the students at CSU build their careers through internships and other partnerships that the university has to help benefit the students. So I'd like to thank you for just acknowledging that resource that the university does offer. Now, after you graduated from CSU and you began your business career, would you say that at any turn of your career, from the beginning towards the end of the career, that your race impacted your career? And if so, in what way?
The short answer to that is that yes, it did, and it was always there. Dante, it was always there. And when I came out, there weren't many Black students joining the firms like this, right? So there weren't very many. I can't even remember if we had any Black partners. I don't think so. We didn't have very many women either. And so you do feel a bit isolated that way. But, I always had this thing. I always reached out, if someone didn't like me because of my race, then that was just too bad, because I engaged. And I always found that if you engage and you break down the barriers, you can make some pretty darn good relationships. And so I was always conscious of it, and I always just fought through it. So I went to all of the firm events. I joined a number of organizations over that time and participated in them. And, I also tried to set a standard, so a standard of excellence. So no matter what, everybody knew that I was a serious person. I was engaged, and I was pretty darn good at what I do. And so people knew that I meant business. And so, And at the same time, I focused on building relationships. And so I didn't care what color they were. I always focused on building relationships and spending the time. Relationships can be a really powerful thing. And so I spent a lot of time learning and appreciating how to navigate whatever group I'm in. It didn't matter. I didn't care. I wanted to navigate, and I wanted to play a major role in whatever group I was in. So that's kind of how I dealt with it. I did have issues with some clients. I mean, I had clients that didn't want me to come on to the account back then. And it was interesting when I went through that, Dante, because the firm stood up for me. So, back in the 70s, in the early 80s, how many firms would say, we'll just resign if this person's not, if you want them off, then we leave. How many times did that happen back then? You might see that today more than you would have seen it back then, by far. I mean, it was unheard of. And so when the firm, stood up, that meant a lot to me. So, Dante, I tried to make it a non-issue by the quality of the work that I do and my interest in building relationships.
So while you were building those relationships, did you find it difficult, a more difficult situation to build those relationships because of your race? Or your hard work spoke for itself? With the hard work, the relationships were easier to build?
I think it wasn't just hard work. It was the quality of the work. So, I always had a saying that, you always want your work to speak for yourself, not just hard, but the quality of it is so high. I always focused on our clients demanding that I be put on the account. That always spoke volumes. So, it was some of that. The other part of that was, that helps a lot, but your interest in having those relationships are equally important. So how much interest are you demonstrating in having that relationship? Now, some people didn't want to have one. And if they didn't want to have one, then that's great. I didn't back down from that. And I tried to have the best relationship that I could with them. The person that I really avoided, I always, no matter what I worked on, when I got a performance review, if someone said you just did a great job and it was outstanding, I didn't want to work for that person anymore. Because I always wanted to work for the person who was going to give me really direct, constructive advice on how to improve. And if you couldn't give me that, then you weren't doing me any good. So I always focused on the people who really took an interest, that took the time to really articulate, what areas I could really, step up my game. If you couldn't do that, wasn't so much interested in the accolades. I was more interested in the areas where I could really improve my game.
So, Mr. Anderson, just to backtrack, you spoke about mentors and sponsors, and also having mentors and sponsors in Chicago State University. And what I would like to know is, who would you say influenced you the most during your time at Chicago State University? If you have a name of a faculty member that you feel like really impacted your journey, and what was that experience like?
So I would identify two people, not just one. One was Dr. Taylor, and I don't know if there's anybody on the line who might remember her, but she was extraordinary to me. And she was one of the individuals that, kind of pulled me out of my, so I was really deep into my, studying and the like. She forced me to be on on stage. She forced me to be more outgoing and engaged with people. She's the one that always said, gosh, the sky was the limit. I mean, so she was really pushing me along. And so she did those two things. She pushed me and she got me out of my comfort zone. The other person that I would highlight would be Dr. Gutman. And he was a bear. He was tough. And, to get a good grade out of his class was just tough. And I really liked that. And so he made it really hard. And he's the guy who said, after going through a couple of his classes, I sought him out, his classes out. And one day he told me that it's time for me to start taking tests that were similar to taking the CPA exam, that he thought I was prepared to start doing that. And so he pushed me along. He's the one that, helped me think through this accounting profession and the firms that I was going to interview with. And so those two people stick out more than anything. I mean, I remember them to this day.
It's always great to have those people that help shape your journey. So business students such as myself will love to know from experienced professionals such as yourself, what skills do you think that a business student would need to be successful in the business world today?
Well, I mean, I think relationship skills are big, as you can tell. I think the thing that's really valuable are people who understand how to problem solve. Who can problem solve, who can exercise really good judgment on issues. I think it's those kind of things that really, help a person really excel in the business world. I think those skills are enormous. The other one I'd say is communication skills. I mean, the ability to communicate, regardless of whether or not you're talking to someone, a lot smarter than you or in different areas of the company, the ability to communicate is enormous. And so I put all those different things together. And one of the things I used to always do, Dante, I used to always have kind of in the center of my mind to overperform. No matter what I was working on, no matter what I was doing, to overperform. And so, and it would come down to the simplest things. As I did that, from everything from, never being late and always being early, to delivering a work product before it was due. So if someone said, I want this done by Wednesday, I had it done by Monday. If it was we're having a meeting at 8 a.m., I was there around 7:30 or so. I was early. I was always there. And then the last thing is, I always took on the things that were either the more difficult things or the things that others didn't want to do. So that people who I worked for coming up in the firm, that they wanted me on their account because, I made it easier for them, right? So I took it on. And so I think it's all those kind of things. I think, in just being successful in the business world, I think all of those things kind of wrap together and really play an important role in someone being successful, particularly for, an African-American male or female, that ability kind of stick out that way that people always, I always used to say, gosh, if someone's talking about you behind their back, what are they going to say? Right. So, one thing I know one thing, the job will be done and it'll be done on time and it'll be done with a really high level of quality. Everything else, and I suppose that I have one other thing that I really like working with this guy. So I think all those, you put all those together. That's how I would think about it.
Well, excuse me. I like the fact that you mentioned communication and building relationships. It kind of reminds me of a course that we take in Chicago State University called Career Fluency, taught by Professor Ross. And he teaches us the importance of soft skills, learning how to build relationships, and the difference between managing and leading and the different leadership styles. And it seems that what we're being taught in a university, at a university level, will translate very well to the business world. So I'd like to thank you for that. So I know that you said overperform. Would you say that's a mantra that you live by?
It is. And Dante, I mean, I always told my kids, I said, listen, you might find people smarter than you, but you should never find somebody who works harder than you. And so overperform. And that's why I go back to it, no matter how complex the issue is or how simple it is, everything you do, overperform. And you know, if you're an African American in a huge global company, everybody's watching you, right? So, you know, I always said, okay, bring that on, overperform, and that's kind of it's kind of my mantra, I suppose. And I think it touches every single thing.
I think that's a great mantra. Myself, I coach youth football. And one of the things that I like to let my student athletes know is hard work beat talent that does not work hard all the time. So it kind of coincide with the overperform.
Mm-hmm.
Put your best foot forward and leave it all out there.
Yep.
So, Mr. Anderson, over your illustrious business career, are there any accolades and or awards you received that you would like to share with us today?
I've received a lot of them.
So where do you start, huh?
Yeah. I don't focus so much on those things personally. And they're nice, and you always appreciate that sort of thing. I always at least on a personal level, I always think about whose lives you've impacted, and that's kind of how I think about that. I mean, what have you done to help somebody else succeed, or at least have a chance to succeed? And so, I think that's where the personal satisfaction is really high for me. And so, whether it's somebody coming out of school or somebody at the firm or somebody, no matter where they're at, what are you doing to help them be better at what they do? So that's how I've always thought about, accolades. If someone would say, you know what, I was able to do all of this. If somebody one day mentions me when they're talking about the Taylors and the Goodmans, then I've done. If that's accolades enough for me, those mean more to me than anything else.
And I'm pretty sure you are making a major contribution to a lot of lives that are around you. And I would like to know, you've been retired from Ernst & Young after an incredible career. However, you're not the average retiree. Tell us, what have you been doing since your retirement?
So, the way I would characterize this, I have like 3 buckets of activities that take up my time. So I have one bucket where I'm really active on large public company boards. So they're pretty active there, and I'm heavily involved in nomination and governance type activities, audit, finance activities, and the like. So I'm really active in there. So I have 4 public company boards. I also speak on those issues frequently in different places. So that's one bucket of activities. Another bucket of activities has been around what are you doing around the community. And so the one I took on personally is education. So, I was really active with Prospective Charter Schools, which is in Chicago, 5 campuses, but 3 campuses, 5 schools, and that are really heavily focused in the Black community. And my idea was, every kid who graduates out of there will go to college, period, end of story. And, we should make sure money is not an issue. And so now the only thing that you have to worry about is having, the grades and the competency to go to whatever school you want to go to. So that was another bucket of activities. I'm a big golfer. I love to play golf. And so I always wanted to make a difference in the golf world, largely because it's been pretty exclusionary for so long. So now I'm on the executive committee of the USGA, and really helping to drive golf and include diversity and inclusiveness into the foundation of the game. And so that's in another bucket. And the third bucket was around political influence. And so active at the mayoral level, active at the governor level, even active federal level to some degree. And so those are my 3 buckets of activities. And so, while I retired from the firm, I've been enormously active in all of those. And so, yeah, I'm pretty busy.
So you've been very active post-retirement. So you stated that you've been on a number of boards as a board member. And I would like to know, can you speak to how can Black executives influence the corporate suite and the boardrooms to support diversity in the corporation?
Well, I think there's a skill in bringing up delicate issues that might make people feel uncomfortable, and I try to use that skill. And so talking about the tough things. And so what does it mean to really embrace diversity and alike? And I don't think it's just hiring people. To me, I think there are 3 areas that a company can really engage in to really make a difference in diversity. And one certainly is the people that they hire and the people they fire, the people they promote, and all that, all that goes on in the company. But I think in the other 2 areas where I think the corporate community needs to focus on, I would say it's procurement and it's philanthropy. And I'll focus on procurement because this is where I've been very vocal about this. And we have a Black Directors Conference and we talk about it there too. And that is, where do companies spend their money? So if you're spending your money, if you're hiring law firms, how much of your spending in that area is with Black-owned firms? Mm-hmm. Or if you're talking about, negotiating another lease for your office space, how many times and how much are you using Black-owned firms in the real estate area, or whether it's investment banking, asset management, all of those high-end services. I'm not talking about janitorial services. I'm talking about high-end services that impact the future of that company. How many times are you using Black firms? This is really important because, like I said earlier, I love capitalism. And my point is, make capitalism work in the Black community. It's done wonders for the white community. Well, let's make sure that the principles of capitalism are being used and embraced in the Black community. If you're hiring those firms, then those firms have to hire Black professionals. If you use those firms, you've now started to close the wealth gap in the community. I mean, the snowball effect just by actively including Black-owned firms in the way you spend your money, I think addresses a lot of the issues that are affecting the Black community today.
Mhm.
And so don't tell me you gave $1 million to some Black organization. That doesn't do anything for me. But if you're hiring those firms, helping those firms grow, develop, excel, now you're making a long-term impact on that community. So to me, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, I'd like to talk about all three and how they fit together. And then a company is really starting to make a really meaningful impact in the area of diversity and inclusion.
Do you find it difficult for corporate America? I mean, do you find corporate America have difficulties having these tough conversations?
I think, well, it kind of depends on what time frame you're looking at. So, if you look at it today, companies are much more willing to engage. I mean, so everybody looks to George Floyd and wants to talk about George Floyd. What I like to talk about, and I don't want anybody to get me wrong, that was horrendous. It was awful. But the one I thought was really interesting, that I think if you're in the business community, is worth really looking at and dissecting, is the guy in the park.
Bird watcher.
I'm sorry?
The bird watcher in the park?
The bird watcher in the park.
Right.
That one, I think, is where you can really start to learn exactly what goes on. So, here's a lady who tried to weaponize her understanding of the issues affecting Black America, and she tried to use it as a weapon. Now, that's one, if you unpack, I think you can really use that to understand what happens in the business world. So, I think about, how many times have you had a big project, at a company, and you're in a conference room and, everybody's talking about who's going to lead this thing. And so they want Dante to lead it. And someone says, Dante, he's a nice guy, but, he makes me feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he does this and artfully gets it moved from Dante to someone else. That person is the person you need to deal with. And this is where I think, all of us, white America, Black America, has to stand up and call those things out, because that happens literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times throughout the country. And I think, it has an impact on the way Black professionals at companies accelerate in an organization. So, that's kind of how I think about it. Now, companies are more willing to engage and discuss. One of the things I've told a couple of the companies I'm on the board with, who are really trying to understand and deal with it, I said, you can't just come in and think you're going to convince everybody that you have this newfound appreciation for diversity in life. You need to ask yourself some other questions. I mean, do you understand why we're having the issues we have today? And why is this all happening today? Do you understand what happened? And you don't have to go all the way back to slavery to figure this out. You can just look at the last 100 years. What happened in the last 100 years that created the dynamics that we have today? Do you know? Because if you don't, then it's hard to really relate and understand what people are trying to tell you. So you have to take the time to go learn. And if you really want to take this on and understand it and really try to make sure you make the right decisions for the company, then you have to have some context and perspective around these issues. And so that's what I'm pushing with the companies I'm with.
So using that example of the bird watcher in the park and how it relates to corporate America, how would you advise someone to navigate the issues of race and bias in corporate America, such as that example that you elaborately just spoke on?
So, I was always pretty aggressive in the firm and what I wanted and where I wanted to go. Now, it just so happens I wound up having some people who really supported me and really pushed me. So, for me, I always said, people ought to know that I'm serious about what I want to do here. And there was never any, guessing by, any of the people I work for that I had aspirations and that I didn't want anything to get in the way of it. I wanted challenges. And so people understood that. Yeah. One of my first promotions, well, not my first, but when I was getting a little higher up in the firm, I went and asked for a promotion. And, so I said, listen, I should be promoted. And here's why. Here's the criteria we talk about and being, at another level. Well, I got that. And so if there's something that's going to interfere with me being promoted, then I just need to know what it is. And so otherwise, I want to be promoted. Now, as it turns out, I got promoted. So, I always kind of feel like you got to take your career in your own hands. Nobody's going to care about your career more than you are. So you just got to be active and engaged in the right kind of way, respectfully and the like. But if there's something I'm missing, I want to know what it is. And so I can deal with it. And so taking responsibility for your career is a big deal. And so if somebody in a room like the example I used is sitting back saying, having reservations, there's a number of people around that table who understand how serious I take all this, that they're willing to speak up on my behalf.
Okay. Keeping up with the university theme for this series for our alumni, featuring our alumni, is Our Stories Continue. How would your story continue, Mr. Anderson?
How would my stories continue? I'm pretty grounded in the things that I really care about. And right now, the things that I really care about right now is education of the people in our community and making sure they're academically prepared. And so that's one big thing that I kind of, I put a stake in the ground and around that issue. The other thing I put a stake in the ground now is in the golf community and getting more African Americans focused on golf, playing it, working in it, and that those opportunities exist. And and by the way, one of the nice things I'd highlight is the fact that the USGA, they're interested in doing a lot of the things we're talking about. So they've been actively embracing a number of the things that we put on the table. And so I feel really good about where that's going. So I think for the foreseeable future, those two things will be very important to me as I look out, certainly in the short term and in the long run. I don't know. I have a lot of energy, I got a lot of ideas, and so I want to take those on and drive them as best I can. The next thing, I don't know. I don't know what that next thing is going to be. But right now, those two things are, first and foremost in my mind.
Well, I can say you have definitely piqued my interest in learning how to play the game of golf.
And by the way, Dante, the only reason why I play golf is because a client insisted that I learn. And that company, that client, did me a huge favor. And so, and so that's how I started learning. I never played that game before in my life. I was 28 or 29 years old when that all happened. And it had an enormous impact on my life. And so, so all those things mixed together. I used to tell my partners, I said, gosh, if you get somebody out on the golf course for 4 hours, you can't get that piece of work after 4 hours, then you probably need to figure out something else to do. Because you got them captured to engage on anything you want to engage on. And that's enormously valuable.
I guess it's like the old saying go, the deals are made on a golf course.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but certainly relationships are built.
So finally, what career advice would you give to current Chicago State University student scholars, such as myself, on how best to make it in today's business climate?
I think once you get in one of these companies, be deliberate. Make sure people know you want to be your serious person. You want to take on the challenges that are in front of you. I think that's one of the key things I think would be good for anybody to do. The other thing I'd say is reach for the stars. Reach for the stars. And you know what? If you don't make it to the stars, you'll make it to the moon. And if you make it to the moon, you've done pretty darn good. So, no barriers, you break them down, and you don't have to get, disillusioned or, overly disappointed on something. If you don't get a promotion or something, lift yourself back up, take on the next thing. Always look for the bad advice. And, or not the bad advice, but the advice that really is giving you constructive criticism. Understand it, break it down, seek out those kinds of things. It only is going to make you better. And so I go back to what I said earlier. I don't want to sit there and get accolades. I wanted the things that are going to make me be better. And so I needed to understand the soft spots. And if you take those on, and you build relationships so people will help you figure out how to get better at them, you can go really far.
Well, as we draw down to the conclusion, Mr. Anderson, we have a question from a student, and they would like to know, this is from Mr. Marshall Gibson. Mr. Anderson, were there any campus activities that you participated in that helped you during your career?
So Dr. Taylor worked with me to start an accounting association on campus. And I, along with a few other students, we started it. We built it. We had, we actually put on a gala to help raise money for it. And so that's the one I did. And and actually it turned out to be a really cool thing because it helped me be better. Being up in front of people, being more outgoing and all that sort of thing. And so that's the one I did. And then, and remember, I was working at night. So, so I worked at night. We put together this organization, and it turned out to be a really powerful thing.
Well, Mr. Anderson, I'd like to thank you for your time. The university would like to thank you for your time. And I just want to wish you the best of luck and success in your post-retirement career. And thank you. Thank you for this great conversation. And we look forward to speaking with you again in the near future.
Dante, thank you. Good luck to you in your career. If you ever need any advice or counsel, you know how to get a hold of me. I'm happy to share whatever thoughts I can, but good luck to you.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you.
So we're not concluding, right? First of all, we want to thank Dante and Mr. Anderson for this incredible conversation. I've taken a lot of notes, and you'll see my notes summarized on my LinkedIn account and then on a LinkedIn account of our university. Thank you so much, Mr. Anderson, for your comments. They are rich and very insightful. I can't wait some of the nuggets that you've shared about hard work, perseverance, and what corporate America can do to advance diversity in our corporations and in the Black community. I mean, looking at where people spend their money with professional services firms is something that we advocate for at Chicago State University. So we are now going to move from our interview to remarks from one of our sponsors, Discover Financial, and welcome Waltis Gatherings from Discover to just say a few words about Discover's support for Chicago State and their commitment through the sponsorship of the Presidential Lecture Series.
Thank you, President Scott. It's an honor to be here today with you all. It was awesome listening into you, Dante, and Mr. Anderson. My name is Watis Gathings, and I'm here representing Discover. I've been a part of the Discover family for about 11 years, but prior to that, I was born and raised here on the South Side. So in March of last year, Discover announced our intent to open a new customer care center here in Chatham, about 1 mile away from the university. Our program includes 1,000 full-time jobs, so we're very excited about the possibilities of partnering continuously with the university to not only make sure local residents have the opportunity to work in their neighborhoods, but also to be educated through Chicago State in their neighborhoods as well. One of our proudest moments have been finding the gym in Chicago State and being good neighbors and intentional partners. So we look forward to all the great things that Discover will have the privilege of doing with Chicago State over the next year. And it's an honor to be sponsors here today. So congratulations on the great lecture series. I had the opportunity to listen into all three, and I've been enriched by them. And well done to you, Dante, and all your success that you'll have as you continue to navigate your educational and professional journey. Back to you, President Scott.
Thank you so much for your support and your commitment to Chicago State University. It really means a lot to us. We also want to announce the students who have been chosen, the graduate students who have been chosen for the scholarship you provided in your support and sponsorship of the lecture series. So if you can, we're going to display the names of our students who will benefit significantly from the scholarship dollars that have been provided to Chicago State by Discover through your sponsorship of the lecture series. We're just going to display the names. And our student moderators are also receiving a scholarship for their support and their work in preparing for the lecture series.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, I want to thank each of you for your time this afternoon. Again, I cannot wait to summarize my notes and share the wisdom that Mr. Anderson has provided to our students and our university community this afternoon. This lecture is not only being live streamed from the university, but it's also appearing on our Facebook account for where many of our audience sit. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. And thank you everyone who participated in or listened to our presidential lecture series for Black History Month 2022. So thanks everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.